Hey, time for another draft physics video presentation. Hey, it's a little extra. Okay, Mindless Marble says answer the fundamental momentum question. The idea that you can't really use energy twice. And the kinetic energy theorem essentially is giving you some free ride. It, of course, creates free energy. That's the whole problem. And what's embedded in this responses from these people is the fact that they are trying to protect some notion that the two concepts are not the same thing. They're not describing the same thing when they're overtly describing the same thing, energy. And there's, I don't think, any rational denying that that's how the whole thing started. That's what it's always been, is a replacement for momentum, some new theory. A living force theory. So the original idea is that this is called momentum, P, okay, is mass times the velocity, and Newton basically said this equals force. Okay, if a force acts on you, it's going to change your momentum, and if you want it in units, you know, like per minute or per hour, then you can just divide, you know, your momentum by the time function if you want to hear the force per hour, you know, watts per second. If you want to know how much energy it is because it's reoccurring. But if you just want to know the final energy, you just do the final time, okay, and call that a 1, all right? And so it's just, this is all it is. Momentum equals force and equals energy, okay? And it didn't have the word energy because they were using the word quantity of motion. But that's all there is. And their change is to say it's 1/2 mv squared. So it has exactly the same components in it. It's just made out of mass and velocity. Those are the only two elements. But they call this a living force. Okay, so it has living LF. It's, you know, like what's that company that's you know, Life is Good, LG. Yeah, it's like LF. Okay, living force. So it is just some sort of magic, because they won't concede it's made out of the same elements. If you say kinetic energy can do something, well, momentum can do the same thing because it's made out of the same stuff. There's nothing, you can't make some statement say, well, momentum can't and kinetic energy can, because it's the same thing. It's exactly the same substance. It's mass and velocity. You're just adding a different amount of the two things. So it's mud, it's water, it's oil and water, or it's you know, it's orange juice and milk. It doesn't matter what you're adding. You're adding the same two things. You're just saying the proportions are different. But it's the same stuff. It's just ludicrous to say this can do fundamentally something different in the universe than this can do. It's exactly the same stuff. Oh, I did a Professor Lewin. I mean, a dotted line. Do you see that? I did it just by complete accident. I'll have to see if I can do the accident again like that. I guess that's how he figured it out. Hey, look, I made a dotted line. You know, just by bouncing the chalk. Well, anyway. Little things are entertaining. They are. Little things are entertaining. Anyway, so let's read his response. So I'm saying, look, how do you ever move anything, create heat, create friction, cause any kind of movement in the universe? So that's all those things are, right? Heat and friction and all that kind of stuff all has to do with movement. You have to move the little pieces. So the little pieces have to be moved. If you're going to move them, you have to move them by exchanging essentially your momentum. If the pins move, the pins are moving because you're exchanging your momentum with the pins. You're giving them something you have, and now they don't have. Now they have it and you don't. That's what the bowling ball is doing. So how can they possibly justify this show anyway without using something's momentum? Okay, so you can't do both things. You can't deform an object and then keep your momentum, but you had to give it something. You had to give it some portion of your mass and velocity. You can't have the same mass and velocity after, so you had to change something. All right, how could anything ever travel through the universe and cause events and not lose momentum? You can't make things happen and then keep all of the make happening capacity inside of you. You can't keep the same mass and velocity. All right, how could you ever transfer momentum and deform an object? You can't both transfer it and deform it. So the simple argument is, if I'm going to transfer my momentum to something, I can't spill any of it first. I can't make heat, misshape things. I can't make sparks. I can't make sounds, because if I do, it has to come out of my velocity. We're not changing my mass, so we know it has to come out of my velocity. And so I can't possibly convey the same power if I've allowed it to change. Now, the only exception is if I make a change, like say if I have a laser beam and I shoot it into a crystal that shoots the light exactly in the same direction I'm shooting it, and it doesn't scatter any of it. Well, yeah, then my momentum's still going the same way, my energy's still going the same way, any deformation is in the same direction I'm going, so what's the difference? It's the scatter. That's what heat is. That's what vibrations are. That's what sound is. Those are all evidence of the energy being scattered. It's evidence of the energy not going where it was going. So it's just too obvious. All right, so it's they can just say this glib crap and there's nothing you can do, right? They just say something stupid that doesn't. Where was this established as a truth in history? Where's the theoretician? Just like this crap with the gravitational waves. Where was this theory proposed that you can convert matter into bent space? Who invented that idea, and what is it? How's it defended? Except you just made it up. So he says momentum doesn't convert into other forms of energy. What other forms doesn't it convert into? So deformation is already. So he's saying deformation is a form of energy. I think pretty clearly you can understand deformation certainly isn't a form of energy explicitly, in the sense it's still pretty big pieces that are flying off. So the argument is it's kind of a duh argument, right? I mean, even Leibniz knew this. So I take two pieces of clay and I smash them into each other. What happens to the velocity? Okay, we can't change their mass. So what happens to the velocity? Well, this one's going this way, and this one's going this way, and they're going to hit each other. What happens to the velocity? Well, the velocity ends up moving clay this way, and this way, and this way, and this way, right? The two clumps hit each other. They reshape into a blob of clay. And so where did the motion this way go and the motion this way go? It obviously got converted into motions this way, and 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 motions that way, and motions that way, and motions that way. Right? That's the obvious answer. That's what they speculated in the 1600s. They were smart enough to get this. Okay? That's where the motion went. So those are real particles. Those are real atoms that are moving. How you're saying they don't have momentum? That I didn't exchange momentum into the particles and make the particles move? So if I made them out of glass and the glass shatters, okay, is your argument that that's not momentum? I didn't exchange momentum with the pieces of glass? I didn't have to give up some of my velocity to give the glass velocity in these directions? I mean, it's a ludicrous on its face statement that you can't defend. Okay, and so what's the alternative? What's the alternative statement? Okay, momentum doesn't convert into other forms of energy. So, but kinetic energy does? mv squared. Okay, let's not even put the 1/2 on it, right? Let's go with the original formula. Somehow mv squared can? It's made of exactly the same thing. How come it can do things? Oh, that's right. It's a living force. Okay, it's magical. It's not mv squared. It's mv squared times religion. Okay, that's all it is. Times God. Okay, it's a God theory. It has a magical element that no one has ever been told about. Okay, it's not, kinetic energy isn't mass and velocity alone. No, it's a magical mixture that creates Holy Ghostness. Okay, and now you can do things in the universe. You can make extra things move because you have Holy Ghostness, because you're a little soliton. Okay, soliton. That's a word invented by Leibniz, the inventor of this idiotic formula. Soliton. It doesn't mean soliton like sun. No, it means soliton like soul, like religious living thing. like God created little thinking thing, soliton, moving through the universe, and everything, all material objects are made out of magical little living things. That's their religion. This is disgusting. Oh. Smart people fall for this? Oh, it's disgusting. Anyway, okay. Transfer of momentum from one object to another is involved in collisions. Yeah, the whole subject is collisions. That's right. Every single thing you do is a collision. I'm colliding with the atmosphere right now. I'm transferring. The momentum of my hand is being transferred to the environment. That means the hand can't keep going the same velocity because it's being dragged to a halt by the opposing energy I'm losing, the energy I'm leaking into the environment by moving the other little particles, by transferring my velocity to them. I'm not doing it because I'm transferring a soliton or a monad. This is another Leibniz word, monad. You know. These are made up little spiritual entities. They might as well just use the word angel. This is what they believe the universe has in it. When I move my hand, I made angels, and the angels are moving the elements of the atmosphere. I don't have to do it. I don't have to give up anything. I don't have to lose anything, because I'm making magical angels, and they're doing the work for me. Okay, but it is not converted into non-momentum quantities. Yeah. So how does your MV have some special powers the other MV doesn't have? Exactly the same ingredients, orange juice and milk. How does your orange juice and milk combination mean you can do that? You can make non-momentum things. You know, but momentum can't. So the momentum juice, that's exactly the same juice, just a different proportion of orange to milk, is somehow incapable, but your special magic juice is capable. Just so bad. Gary hasn't provided a reason why we should expect momentum to be converted into non-momentum at all. I don't have any expectation that there's anything called non-momentum. I know that electrons have momentum. I know it. I know that photons have momentum, and I think you know it too, that every formula that discusses the energy of a photon concedes that it has an infinitesimally small mass, but a real mass, because it conveys a real energy. So you already know that. So why would I think velocity doesn't cause momentum in everything? And that everything is the momentum of something. Every event in the universe involves something that has a mass and a movement. And there isn't anything else. And so you haven't provided. So Mindless hasn't provided a reason why I should expect momentum not to be, in essence, everything in the universe is made of it. Everything that's significant in doing something has to have it. You can't be significant if you're not doing it. If you're not carrying momentum, you're not carrying, hello, I'm here. You're carrying, I'm irrelevant. If you don't have momentum, you got a I'm irrelevant sign, and you are completely invisible, frankly, to the universe. The only thing that makes something visible in the universe is momentum. It's momentum. So anyway, so then he has the gall to say Newtonian mechanics, when his mechanics is not Newtonian mechanics. Clearly, this was an attack against Newton. Leibniz was Newton's worst enemy in life, a man who had slandered Newton essentially in arguing that, you know, certain events took place that didn't take place, and made a big problem for Newton in terms of having the integrity of announcing his, you know, calculus and all that crap and blah, blah, blah. So this is a real event that they just deny existing. Okay, that this formula was created by somebody with an agenda. Somebody who didn't like Newton and hated Newton's physics. And overtly stated his dislike for the physics. The science of Newton. Alright, so this is just religion, and they're going to keep defending it because it's their team, it's their God. So they're just some kind of weird religion Okay, and that's all this is. And they're going to defend it like any other faithful believer in their silly, fucktarded notions. They're just going to sit there and bang everybody over the head with their silly Bible. Okay, it says that the kinetic energy that is converted into other forms of energy. Newtonian mechanics, he says that it is kinetic energy. So obviously Newton had no acceptance of mv squared. He never accepted its existence. It never exists in any Newtonian equation. It has absolutely nothing to do with Newton's understanding of the universe. Newton knew there was just one thing, momentum. Everything he calculated is based on momentum. So you're just overtly lying now to sit there and try to say this has Newtonian credibility. It has no Newtonian credibility. It has nothing to do with anything Newton ever said, ever calculated, ever projected into the universe. It in fact is exactly opposed to Newton, what you are arguing. It's just such a lie. Again, this is as big a lie as to say Einstein believed in entanglement. Oh. Anyway, Newtonian mechanics says that it is kinetic energy that is converted into other forms of energy. Okay, and how does it do the conversion? If it's not using mass and velocity, what is it using? Monad power? You know, solitonianism? What is it? What's the other ingredient? If it's not mass and velocity, what ingredient are you using to make these other forms of energy? What besides velocity does anything really have? Right? But again, exchanging mass doesn't help. You need to exchange velocity. Velocity is the easy thing to exchange. Exchanging mass is the hard thing to exchange. I mean mass that doesn't have momentum. Obviously, to exchange a piece of mass, I would have to give it momentum, right? I'd have to throw it at you. So I'm giving it velocity too. It's hard to give you mass with no velocity. Okay. So I mean, this is so disgusting that like again, like anybody who has any kind of love of truth and the dignity of knowledge and intelligence and logic and facts and evidence would type such tripe. Okay, at some point you need to sit yourself down and learn the actual theory as opposed to the BS way, as opposed to BS your way through with superficial name dropping. So it's name dropping to make the distinction between the two people who originated the two different theories, momentum, and again, it's Descartes. Okay, let's understand, it's Descartes' mechanics that Newton perfected. It's not like Newton invented the whole idea of momentum. No, the idea of momentum was around long before Newton. It's a Galilean idea. You're the one using, you know, the opposite of name dropping in the sense that you're slandering those people with a theory they didn't have. You're saying their mechanics forces you to believe, when no, their mechanics doesn't force it at all. It's your perversion of their mechanics. An overt perversion. Again, Newton's pretty clear. Force equals momentum. And if you want to know what the force was per second or per minute, well, then you can divide by time if you wish. But the force is essentially always momentum. It's a change in your momentum. The total change will be over the total time. Anyway, pretty obvious. So anyway, this is just so bad. I don't know what to say. I'm so disappointed in the sense that I didn't think smart people would go this low. I mean, that they could be this despicable in just making crap up. You know, saying something as ridiculous as, well, kinetic energy is made out of something special that momentum doesn't have, and that's why it can deform things and be completely transferred. Oh, yeah. So anyway, Physics Girl is 100% correct in her video. So Physics Girl basically said, I spilled half the paint, but I poured it all into the bucket. So that's her argument. You can conserve the momentum, okay, and cause a whole bunch of other activity in the universe. You can do a bunch of work over here, over there, all these places, but you still have the same calorie. You didn't burn any calories to do all that extra work. Nothing no part of your mass or your velocity had to be used to give other things mass, to give other things velocity. I could give velocity to a whole bunch of other stuff, but I didn't have to use any of my velocity to do it. I mean, it's a ludicrous proposition. It's so nonsensical. But this is the same guy who just previously defended the idea that, Newton's third law means I can send 2,000 joules this way and 2 joules that way. And that's obedient to Newton's third law. I can throw 2,000 joules that way, and I have a recoil of 2. I can make a special kinetic energy gun that'll allow me to shoot 2,000 joules that way. And I only need 2 joules of recoil. That's it. Same energy go this way? No, it doesn't have to happen. No worries. I mean, this is just so despicable. It's just, there's no other words for it. It's despicable behavior. All right. The momentum is conserved. That is, okay, you saved your velocity. You kept your velocity. So even though you gave other particles velocity, you hit the other train and pieces of the train flew off at high velocity. You still have all your velocity. You didn't use any of yours to make them do that. Can't make any sense. All right. Then the 2 trains won't lose total momentum. So again, total momentum just means the fact is that you didn't change M and V, right? But we did change M. We doubled M. So obviously to conserve the momentum, we have to spread the jelly thinner on the mass spread. Again, they'll never draw you this picture, right? Because they can't draw a sensible picture of their mv squared. They can't make it make sense. I can tell you that this is logical. Okay, this is what Newton saw. I'm sure this is what Newton saw. Newton saw mass as a platform. All right? And so when you had a small platform, you had to pile the velocity. Any energy you hit something with, you had to pile it on top of that small mass. And so it would be a big velocity. And then if you had a big mass, you have to spread across the entire mass evenly. So if I put in a certain amount of energy, I'm going to have to spread the velocity this way. Okay, so that this area, the velocity times your mass, well, this area will always, okay, this is your momentum. This is what you have as energy. And you can have it in these different shapes, but the volume will be the same. Their theory says that this platform, when you put velocity on it, okay, that the velocity vector is squared. So I just have to keep doubling, the amount of velocity. So I just do this, right, as I'm multiplying the velocity. And so somehow the object has all of this extra. Okay, so the small mass gets only this, but if a big mass gets this much, if I have a small mass, then that squaring, see, it's squaring. So I can't even, how do I draw the squaring of the velocity? Because actually I'm going to have to change the shape. Yeah, so the velocity does this. Okay, it does this. This is what it does, but I have to have this be the same as this. So it adds all this extra. Well, that extra doesn't exist. So even doubling it would be stupid. I mean, doubling the velocity would be dumb, but squaring the velocity is ludicrous. It's clearly mass and velocity. That's how Newton saw the universe. And so they're just always lying if they tell you ever that Newton saw anything other than this. No monads, no solitons, no other stuff. It's just mass and velocity in equal proportions to find the area of your energy. This is your energy. This is your force. This is it, this volume created. And they're distorting that perversely. Okay, if momentum is conserved, then see what the total momentum. That's what conservation of momentum says. So he shouldn't even be allowed to use the word conservation. Okay, it just shouldn't be allowed to use, because he doesn't understand the concept at all. Where did you conserve the velocity? You can't possibly have conserved anything because you used it to deform something, to move something. You can't use it twice. You can't scatter the light and keep it in the laser beam. You can't spill the paint and pour it into the bucket. You can't do these things. All right, we'll pause. All right, should be back. So it says here, okay, that's what conservation of momentum says. Equivalently, that's the implication of Newton's third law. So it's just so ironic. He cites Newton's third law when he completely says Newton's third law can't mean anything to his magical kinetic energy. So he's just changing the subject here. Somehow momentum has all these limitations, and yet kinetic energy is, magical. It's made out of special characters, special sauce. There's a special ingredient that makes velocity and mass different, when it's kinetic energy. Even though it's made out of exactly the same components, somehow the components are mixed in some way. They don't have to obey the third law. Only momentum has to obey it. Kinetic energy doesn't have to obey any stinking Newton's laws. Okay, and again, but just the idea that they're implying that this has something to do with Newton's mechanics when it has absolutely nothing to do with Newton's mechanics. Newton would not be able to defend his physics with the existence of mv squared as an idea. Newton's physics has to be thrown out. It can't work. It won't work. Again, if you use the two formulas, you won't be able to land on the moon. You have to use one or the other. And the only one that's going to work is Newton's. So that's the bottom line. That's another way we know it fails. Is NASA isn't fooling when it says it uses Newton's mechanics to land on the moon. It's not lying to you, okay? Because the fact is, if they don't use it, they crash. Because kinetic energy isn't real. It's not about anything real. It's just religion. It's just a silly notion, okay, in an opposition mind that never was defended with any physical evidence. It's just worse than a Ken Wheeler, sideshow, ferrocell bullshit show. It's worse than that because they don't even have a ferrocell. They don't have anything to deceive you. They don't have any experiment. Look, I banged my hand into there and the monads made my other hand move. They don't have anything. They have nothing. Zero evidence. Not a single experiment ever collecting this extra energy. Not in a single thing happening in, again, never will they show you the 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour doing less work than the 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour. Never will they show you how momentum fails to correctly answer a question. They'll never show you a question, show you an answer, and show you how the experiment can't be understood if you use momentum. You must understand kinetic energy to understand the experiment. They'll never show you that experiment, ever. Okay, because it doesn't happen in the real world, and they're just talking absolute shit. Okay. So now I'll move on to Piero's answer, which was the perfect evasion. He just perfectly just said, I can't answer that question because I'll say something stupid if I try. So instead of taking Mindless's approach of just saying absolute bullshit, that the rules for kinetic energy are different than the rules of momentum. Yes, they're made out of exactly the same thing, but it doesn't matter. Because yes, kinetic energy has monad power, and soliton power. It doesn't have to. We don't have to apply the same rules, same limitations. It's just like when they say, "Oh, kinetic energy isn't a vector," when they're talking about, something going this way and something going this way, complete vectors, and they're going to add the vectors, and then they say, "Well, kinetic energy isn't a vector," even though they know the answer is going to be a vector on that linear line. They absolutely know that's the only answer they're going to have. The kinetic energy isn't confused and is going somewhere else. No, they know exactly what the vector is. And they'll say it's not a vector quantity, even though it's overtly a vector quantity. It's just complete nonsense. Terrible science, terrible physics, terrible application of intelligence and honesty and logic. There's none of that here. This can't be called anything intellectually honest. This is an intellectually dishonest evasion of the question. Evasion of the the paradox created by this nonsense theory. You can't use energy to deform something because that's essentially scatter. That's energy you're not getting back. That's spilling your energy. When you make something move perpendicular to your movement, you're not conserving its vector. You're not conserving the direction. You're losing the direction, okay, which means you have less force in the direction you're going. The only way you can deform and conserve is to deform it in exactly the same direction you're moving. If the two pieces of clay went right through each other, okay, then you could say, we have conservation. But, you know, otherwise, no, you didn't conserve, you didn't transfer the energy, you transferred its direction. You converted it into different directions than the two directions the clay had. Okay. Yeah, so we'll go find the Piro thing. All right, so here's the Richie question. So the same question, and yeah, I don't know what this you, Stephen, Mindless, and others are welcome to offer answers and explanations in this quest for truth. Well, that was sort of a weird little thing to add, but certainly the quest is to resolve the question. Okay, there's a right answer. We fundamentally disagree on the answer, and the only way to do anything constructive is to figure out why we disagree and what you're believing in that I'm somehow missing that's correct, or vice versa. And I would argue that clearly you haven't provided any good reasoning or logic or evidence supporting your ideas, clearly. All right, so instead of answering the question, he says, I was originally answering you for the same reason I talked to Gary. Well, you don't talk to Gary anymore. You don't know how to make a response video, apparently, so anymore. So, yeah, you're lame. You're useless because you are going to try to engineer your statements, you know, and take them out of the context. Where I'm desiring to do exactly, let's put them in context. Let somebody else make a video, and then I'll respond to the video, and then they can respond to my video. And that's the only way it's really going to work eventually to get anywhere good. That's the only way you get resolution. All you get is evasion in this nonsense. But anyway, so here this guy is just asking the question, being a mediator, just saying, okay, you don't like each other, and you can't ask questions without insulting each other. So I'll ask you the question without any references to you or him. They're just questions. They're not Gary's question. They're just a question. And your obligation is just to answer the question. That's your challenge. And here he is obviously evading the challenge. Anyway, other people might be interested how it works and how to explain Gary's epic confusion. So he has to throw in the extra bits that don't need to be there to answer the question. So it's just more, obviously, I think you're not epically confused. I think you're an epic liar and cheater. And the fact that you dug up that stupid, you know, that stupid wave evidence was so bad. Noise in equals noise out. You know, it was such a bad thing to do. You know, that, you know, you have no credibility. And then, again, and then linking to air tracks or something, or little carts that cost $600, and you don't get the electronics and you don't get the track. You get the car and the sensor, which would do you absolutely no good without the thing you plug the sensor into. Right? It has absolutely no value, right? The $40 little sensors and the little, they have no value if you can't plug them into their electronics. They're made to be plugged into their device, you idiot. I mean, those things are so insincere that you're just saying, what the epic confusion? No, you're not epically confused. You epically suck as a human being. You're an epic cheater. Okay, but you are just being a messenger boy. And so what? Again, you're, you know, there's philosophical statements about not blaming the messenger and all that kind of crap. That's already a philosophical concept that smart people don't worry about messengers. Pathetic. So he says, no thanks. So somehow he's interested in the discussion. He understands that other people might want to know how it works, and you know, we might be able to fix Gary's confusion, but no, I don't want to do that. You know, it's just so pathetic. What is this crap? No thanks. It's just hilarious. All right, for people that want to feel the warm thrill of confusion, that space cadet glow. So he's the one who has the theory that has no evidence and was completely propagandized by people with exactly that attitude. New Age, oh, science needs to be fun and exciting. Newton's physics is too boring. It doesn't have any living forces in it. You know, we're for the living force. I mean, it's so funny. Okay, so the original originator was a complete, overt religious proselytizer. Overtly stated, there's not enough God in your science. That's his overt. Not an insincere paraphrase. That's exactly his opinion. There's not enough God in your physics. Okay, and then the second group that came to defend that mush was a bunch of free willers who thought humans were doing special things, and a special thinking thing, and a special soul-y thing. So it's just hilarious that he would use that as a critique when that's exactly what his physics is. It's completely unscientific, unevidenced, illogical, irrational, you can't tie it together. It's overt contradictions and paradoxical. So go for it. Yeah, we'll have the opposite attitude. Don't go for that. Okay? Don't be a retard. Don't sit there and, you know, dance around in your I'm a retard suit. Okay? It's disgusting. Grow the fuck up. Okay? And smell the shit. You have no evidence. You can't link me to a single piece of physical evidence. And here you are overtly, aggressively saying, but my science is good science. I have a great legal case. Yes, there's no evidence on the table. I have no evidence to present, but I'm sure I can prove he's guilty. I'm sure it's the truth. He's guilty. Yes, there's no evidence on the table. So what? You don't need evidence, do you? What the fuck do trials have to do with evidence? Evidence is... that's for boring old people. It's a new modern science. We don't need evidence. We just need our faith and our belief. What's all this? Is there something else going on here? No. Okay. You essentially don't want to understand. So yes, I don't want to be religious. I don't want to love Jesus and feel, I can feel Jesus' love because I said, I love you, Jesus. I love you, Jesus. If I do that long enough, you know, maybe I'll get an incidental, you know, gooey feeling. And all of a sudden I'll say, oh, I felt something. I really did. I felt the earth move. Ooh, special. There is a Jesus. Is that what we're all supposed to do? Because you're sitting on your little, whatever, your butt plug of kinetic energy and spinning on it and going, oh, I got a wonderful feeling with this kinetic energy thing. Everybody else should do it? Ew, creepy. Anyway, your argument is it's so incomprehensible it can't be true. He doesn't say that. He's just conveying to you a question that, yes, does ask the question, how can it possibly be possible that I can exchange something and keep it? I can give something my money, I can force something to move over there and force it to move over there, and I still have all my force to move things with. I didn't have to use any of it. How can I use it and keep it? It's not a complex question. And if you actually try to comprehend it, he's denying the fact that, yes, it has been tried to be comprehended and it can't be comprehended. That's what triggered this whole thing. I tried to comprehend it. Physics girl says, I completely transferred the momentum, but I burned down New York City. How'd you do that? Yeah, I can't comprehend it. How did I use the energy to do a whole bunch of other things and still keep the energy to do this? How does anybody rationally comprehend that? That's not comprehensible rationally. That's only comprehensible monadically or solitary-ish. You know, I have to create fake entities and fake notions of reality to make that sensible. Okay, you are undermining your own argument. So he's not making an argument. His argument would be, his argument is, this seems like an interesting question. I'd like to hear the answer. That's giving the benefit of the doubt, right? I think it's a fair thing to say. He's saying it's an interesting argument. I would like to hear more. I would like to hear, you know, how you prove your theory. You know, how do you prove Gary wrong in his objections? I mean, the objections seem reasonable. Yes, you have no evidence. It was inspired by religious kooks. It was defended by crystal rubbers. You know, and you have no experimental evidence. I mean, it's a good reason to doubt that, isn't it? Isn't that the kind of science everyone should doubt? Oh, no. Anyway, if Gary wants me to explain what mainstream physics is actually claiming. Now, you see, he has no clue what mainstream physics is claiming. He didn't even know that Physics Girl was saying, I 100% transferred the momentum but lost half the energy. That is, I had to lose some portion of my velocity, yet I transferred all of my momentum. How did I do those two things? How do I lose my velocity and keep my velocity? Since he gets it wrong, so again, there's no evidence that I've misquoted the professors. I've played their videos. So I can replay Professor Lewin again saying, this is how momentum works. You can't screw with momentum. Kinetic energy, yeah, you screw with it. Can't screw with momentum. Okay. He'll have to figure out how to have a civil, direct conversation. You're the one who can't do that. So again, this is easy to prove, but I mean, you're the one who never engaged in this in a civil, direct manner at all. You just made accusations that I was a flat earther and anti-science and anti-math, and that's your rhetoric. You've never addressed the subject ever. And then he says, "Get it?" Question mark. There's nothing to get except you just evaded the question, right? So Richie says, he's asking these questions for a reason. He wants to understand. Well, you should explain what you're doing. You should say something like, I don't think they're unreasonable questions. That's why I'm re-asking them, is because I think it'd be really cool if you answered them, not evaded them. So anyway, so that's where we are. Like I said, I'm offering $2,000 to be debunked. Okay, these people all think I'm overtly and preposterously wrong, that I don't understand something, yet they can't, in some manner, oppose what I'm saying. They can't show it to be wrong. They can't take my 15-minute videos on the subject of gravity or photons or energy and dissect those 15-minute videos and show where there's a whole bunch of misunderstandings and there's a whole bunch of stuff said that isn't true. They can't do that simple task, even though I'm offering $2,000 for one of the credible ones to do it. And I would, of course, pay these people, too. I mean, I'll pay Pierrot if he'll tell me what's his price to actually try to answer the questions by showing me the physics, showing me how the energy moves, like making it into something actual, like mass and velocity. You know, little bits of stuff with vectors, and show how kinetic energy transfers its vectors without transferring its momentum. How do I make things happen with my kinetic energy, and yet I don't have to change my momentum? Show me you transferring your mass velocity formula without having to use it. Okay, I just magically call it kinetic energy, and I have an inexhaustible supply because I never change my mass or my velocity. I don't change anything to change everything. So I change the universe without changing anything. I don't lose anything. All right. I don't, it's just too silly. So this argument is just too silly. There's clearly one formula is right, one formula is wrong. They aren't in any way compatible. They get completely different answers. If I use one to navigate to the moon or the other, one of them will work and one of them will fail. Now, we don't have a NASA engineer, but maybe that would be a great way to just resolve this, right? If we could actually have a NASA engineer admit, yes, the lunar module, the computer in the lunar module is calculating momentum. It's not calculating kinetic energy. Okay, it's calculating how much mass and how much velocity is leaving objects. It doesn't care about any squaring of the velocity. All right, so there's just no hope here. Well, there's not no hope, but there's diminishing returns. So Jerry Hall does another video. I mean, another moronic comment. So I'll have to do his. He's arguing again that somehow I've evaded his math formula. So we'll go to the page and we'll look at the silly math and just point out how it's just silly. It's just made up. It has no credibility. It makes no sense. It's not Newton's math. All right, it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with Newton. And again, understand, none of the math was done until 1805. So for 200 years, just about, well, 100 and whatever years, from 17, well, yeah, so it's from 17, Leibniz was 1656 when he first proposed it. Yeah, so it's 150 years, let's say. For 150 years, they didn't have any math. There was no math defending mv squared, rationalizing mv squared. It wasn't a derivative of something. It was just a statement. And it was, of course, 100% different than the final formula. So again, it was so wrong, it was 100% off. The numbers were that off, 100% wrong. They said 5, the actual answer is 10, that kind of thing. That bad. For 150 years, it got answers that bad. And the idiots believed it. That's good science. Good science is believing it. Even though the answers are, well, 100% wrong. Yeah, believe it anyway. That's good science. Don't say, maybe we're on the wrong track. Maybe there's absolutely no good reason to do this because Newton's mechanics works. Maybe that would be the sensible thing to say is, well, where does Newton fail? Show me the example where Newton fails to get the right answer. So instead of showing me where Newton failed and we need to fix Newton, they haven't done that even. So you actually have nothing broken, and yet they needed to fix it. So it's no evidence that it's broken, and yet they need to change it. No evidence that it doesn't work. Momentum works. It explains the universe. Why did they fix it? Because the fix obvious now creates all these paradoxes I'm pointing out. So anyway, it's just so bad. Alright, so we'll save the Jerry for next time. And such. Alright, so this has been another DraftPhysics.com video presentation.